Thank you. Yeah, so my slide. Okay. Could you put my slide, please? So I'm Aurélie Clodic. I come from LAS, which is a lab from CNRS in Toulouse, in France. And so I will try perhaps to do what Laurence was saying before, try to demystify what we are doing when we try to implement a human-robot joint action. And I will do that by showing some contribution we've done in my lab, so with my colleague Rachid Alami. So first, what is the definition of a joint action? So if we take the definition of Gunther Knöblich, Stefan Butterfield, and Nathalie Sebens, a joint action is a social interaction whereby two or more individuals coordinate their actions in space and time to bring about a change in the environment. And to handle this joint action, there are several coordination processes. Self-author distinction, joint attention, understanding of intentional action, and shared task representations. And to illustrate, I will take a very, very simple example of a human-robot collaboration. So I'm sorry, I removed the video because I didn't have PowerPoint on my laptop, so it was, but the idea is that so the human and the robot have to build a stack of cubes. So 2 cubes from the size of the human, 2 cubes on the side of the robot, and they just build a stack of cubes. It's very, very simple, and it is intended. So the first process is a self-author distinction. So if we quote Elisabeth Pachery, she said that for shared representations, to foster coordination rather than create confusion, it is important that the agents be able to keep apart representations of their own and others' action and intention. So if we come back to our example, it means that the robot needs to be able to handle a representation of itself and a representation of the human it interacts with. I will come back to that later. And on the other side, from the human side, and I must confess for me it's an open question, it is how does the human handle such self-author distinction in a human-robot case? The second coordination process is joint attention. So we all know that attention is the cognitive process of selectively concentrating on one aspect of the environment while ignoring other things. And psychologists tell us that joint attention provides a basic mechanism for sharing representations of objects and events, and thus for creating a perceptual common ground in joint action. But in fact, what Elisabeth Pachery said is that joint attention involves more than that, more than just 2 people attending to the same object or event. And she said that at least 2 additional conditions must be obtained. The first one is that there must be some causal connection between the 2 subjects' acts of attending, that is, causal coordination. And the second one is that each subject must be aware in substance of the object as an object that is present to both agents, and that, in other words, the fact that both are attending to the same object or event should be open or mutually manifest, and that is mutual manifestness. And what does it mean in our example? It means that in this sphere of joint attention, the objects to be acted upon, their location as well as the location of possible obstacles, be identified by the co-agents, and that they track the same objects and feature of the situation and be mutually aware that they do so. So if we try to implement that, what does it mean on the robot side? It means that we need what we call in robotics situation assessment. So we need perception, so the robot needs to be able to get its position, the position of the human, the position of the object in the environment. But in fact, the position of an object for a robot is something very simple, such as, okay, in this frame, at this position, X, Y, Z, and theta, here is your object. But when you want to interact with a human, if you tell the human, yes, just take the object that is at the position 0, x 0, y 1, z 1.5 in this frame, it would be difficult. In fact, for a human, for example, in that example, the cube is on the table. So we need also to have what we call spatial reasoning. So, for example, we can compute that with geometry that cubes is on the table, that one cube is next to another one, that some cubes are reachable by the robot, some others are reachable for the human, and cubes is visible by both of them. And we do that from the point of view of the robot, but we have also to do that from the point of view of the human. Because, for example, if we are looking on the order of the cubes on the table, it's different from the robot point of view and from the human point of view. It is the same if there is an obstacle on the table. The robot needs to know, for example, that part of the table is hidden for the human. So what we are doing is that we maintain a state of the world for the robot and another one from the human point of view. So we do such situation assessment, and we have a model of the environment from the robot point of view and also from the robot point of view of the human point of view, in fact. And what does mean this joint attention for the human in front of the robot? Because in fact, when you are in front of such robot, we must say that robot perception abilities of our robot are not readable. We cannot say what this robot is able to do, is able to see, is able to whatever when we are in front of such robot. And what about also mutual manifestness? Because if we come back to the definition, it says that each subject must be aware, in some sense, of the object as an object that is present to both. In other words, the fact that both are attending to the same object or event should be open or mutually manifest. So it opens many questions, because it asks us, how can a robot exhibit joint attention? What cues the robot should exhibit to let the human infer that joint attention is met? And on the other side, from the robot side, how can a robot know that the human it interacts with attended with him to the joint task? What are the cues that should be collected to infer joint attention? And to me, such questions are still open questions. The third coordination process is intentional action understanding. So if we come back to Michael Tomasello, he says that each agent should be able to read its partner's action. To understand an intentional action, an agent should, when observing a partner's action or course of action, be able to infer their partner's intention. And in the word of Michael Tomasello, intention is the goal and the plan. It is also linked to well-known processes in psychology, which are goal to action prediction. So, for example, if I tell you that I will give the bottle to Professor De Backer, you will infer that I will do that. So you will infer the action. There is also action to goal prediction. If you see me doing that, you will infer that my goal is to get back my bottle. So intentional action understanding, what does it mean in our example? It means that the robot needs to be able to understand what the human is currently doing and to be able to predict the outcome of humans' actions. So it must be equipped with action recognition abilities. So it could be by learning, but whatever we can have. For example, there we can imagine an extended set of computed facts saying that, yes, if we know that the hand of the agent is moving toward the cube and the distance to the cube is close and the cube is on the table, the probability that agent will pick up the cube is high, for example. What does it mean on the human side? It means that the human needs to be able to understand what the robot is currently doing and be able to predict the outcome of robot actions. It means that viewing a movement, it must be able to infer what is the underlying action of the robot. So to do so, we have developed what we call human-aware motion planning. So when you are doing motion planning, that means you compute a path for a robot. It could be for the arm of the robot. It could be for the base of the robot if it's navigation. You will avoid to compute motion that is not understandable by the human. So for example, in that case, if you ask to the robot to compute a path to take the book on the table, it would be the same for the robot to compute this path or to compute this path. It would be exactly the same. For the robot, it is not different. It is possible, so no problem. But if you want to interact with a human, you will prefer the second one because the human will interpret it easily. So to do this human-aware motion planning, we have done several computations. So perhaps I won't go too much in details. So for example, there we just use three properties, which is safety. So for sure, we will avoid to approach too much the human. Visibility, it has been proven that it is better to do the robot movement that would be visible to the human that is next to the robot, and comfort also. You will avoid to give an object to a human, for example, next to its head or next to its foot or stuff like that. So to do this human-aware motion planning, what we're doing also is that we not only compute the path for the robot, but also for the human it interacts with. So for example, in the first part of the slide, you can see that either the robot do just give the object on the desk and the human comes to take it, or the robot can come to give the object directly to the human. But to do human-aware motion planning does not mean that it is understandable and readable. What I mean is that when we've got this kind of robot, since it's got kind of a head, the people will infer that it should act as a head. So we can do the best motion planning we want with the arm of the robot. For example, if the head of the robot doesn't behave as the human intent the head should do, we lost everything. So for example, if I try to give the bottle to Professor De Becker and I do that, it would be difficult for him to understand. So we have to take care of the whole movement of the robot, and it is we can link that to a concept that has been defined by Cordula Vesper, Stefan Butterfield, and Gunther Knöblisch and Nathalie Sebent, which is coordination smoothers. It means that any kind of modulation of one's movements that reliably has the effect of simplifying coordination. Because in fact, when you are doing an action, the very same action, if it is in interaction or if you are alone, you won't do it the same way because you will adapt your movement to simplify the coordination. The last coordination process is a shared task representation, which play an important role in goal-directed coordination. So what does it mean on the robot side? So we have done a planner, which is a human-aware task planner. So for example, for our build stack, we've got a domain saying that to build a stack, we had a cube and we continue to build the stack. To add a cube, you get the cube, you put the cube, and to get the cube, you can pick the cube or under the cube, etc. And an action is defined very simply by, okay, the precondition is that the person has the object in the hand, and at the end, the object is on the stack, and the object is not in the hand at the hand. So we can call that as an expert definition of knowledge, which is good when you are doing human-robot interaction because it is human-readable. So for example, we have this kind of plan from this planner for our example where the robot pick and place the red cube, then the human pick the black one, then the robot the blue one, and then the back to the green one. And we can have also other possibility with social rules saying that perhaps the robot can do everything, etc. But we can say that this domain is static. So once written, it couldn't be enhanced online. So what about learning? The problem with reinforcement learning, I would say, in human-robot interaction is that for reinforcement learning, you must test every action to learn. But in fact, it could lead to inconsistent behavior that would not be acceptable in natural context. Because if you are doing every action in any orders, it could lead to inconsistent behavior, and the man in front of you won't react in the right way also, so you won't learn anything. So we tried a first experiment trying to say, okay, we bootstrap a reinforcement learning algorithm with our domain, and we try to let the reinforcement learning learn on this expert knowledge, and then try to enhance online. But chair task representation do not only specify in advance what the respective tasks of each of the co-agents are. They also provide control structures that allow agents to monitor and predict what their partners are doing, thus enabling interpersonal coordination in real time. It means that in intentional coordination, agents plan their own motor actions in relation to the joint goal and also to some extent to the other partner's actions. So it can be considered as putting in perspective all the processes already described. So knowing that we track each other the same block in the interaction seen through joint attention, and that the robot is currently moving this block in the direction of the stack by the help of intentional action understanding makes sense in the context of the two of us building a stack together. So we need also to model, to do so, what are the status of the goal, the plan, and the world state and the action from the human point of view also, to be able to take into account this in the achievement of the plan. So we can have an action status, for example, from the point of view of the robot, but also from the point of view of the human, and the same for the plan status that help us to do a task accordingly. So I do not have the film there, but what I want to say to finish is that here I have just speak about 4 coordination process for joint action, which are chair task representation, self-other distinction, joint attention, intentional action understanding. And I have not spoke about common ground that we spoke before in this cultural cognition that I do not speak about. I do not speak about joint commitment, deliberation, negotiation, which are needed to achieve such stuff. And I do not speak much about learning, about dialogue, and all of that under uncertainty. And still, it is complicated. So That's it. It was just, my presentation was just intended to show you what does it mean for us when we try to implement such processes, and what we are trying to do it. Thank you.